you. As we move to the next slide, this is section 1, and section 1 is going to talk about content. What is the content that is expected in content reviews? So we're not only going to talk about the content, we're also going to talk about the questions that content reviewers are asked to answer, as well as the rubrics. And the little cartoon is just a little funny because, we use this as teachers many times where we say to people, it's in the syllabus, when they ask a question, if they had read things thoroughly. That's not unlike what you're going to hear us talking about throughout this content. A lot of information should be provided in the syllabi because that's where the candidates are getting the majority of their information, but there will be some additional places as well. So we're going to move into the whole issue of SPA standards and what we're looking at. The key responsibility of content reviewers is their knowledge of the specialty content standards. So we call those SPA, the Specialty Professional Association Standards. This is why we have you, is because you represent a wide variety of experts in different content areas. These standards are developed by the national associations for the most part. The specialty standards or the SPA standards are the guidance documents for the knowledge and skills to be demonstrated in each of the content program areas. They're so key to what we ask our content reviewers to be looking for. There's not a single set of SPA standards. English has a set, math has a set. Some of them even have a couple of sets. Elementary may have more than one that you're looking at, middle school. So it's very important that you as the expert know which standards for the program that you're being asked to review. Likewise, not all standards are, I'm not quite there yet, but not all standards are organized in the same manner. For instance, the National Council for Teachers of Math have their SPA standards organized in one way, whereas the National Science Teachers Association organized the science standards in a different way. So just know that all the SPA standards are different depending on the National Association. The Educational Professional Standards Board approves programs based on these program SPA standards, so it's very important that we get a good review of them. There are also instances of where our standards board, EPSB, has set some state standards. For instance, the Kentucky Teacher Performance Standards, which are the same things as NTAS standards, are standards that we set as a state. The counseling standards, the school counseling preparation standards, are ones that last August we were adopted by the board. So there are some state standards instead of the national standards as we go. And some examples of these standards are going to be the Cape Elementary 2018. One thing that's key here, and you'll see it when I get to the National Council for Teachers of Math, is we many times date them because these are updated by the national associations. And so Cape has the elementary standards that are that Kentucky is expected the preparation programs to be accountable for now, and they were put out in 2018. AMLE standards is the Association of Middle Level Educators, and those are used in Kentucky. The ILA used to be IRA. Some of you are familiar with maybe IRA. It's ILA, and in 2017, they updated standards. Look at the National Council for Teachers of Math. Note there are 2 years there, 2012 and 2020. Because those standards are out just this year, we do not expect the preparation programs to have all of their courses and everything aligned right now. They have a period of time, about 18 months, in which they are aligning their courses to their SPA standards. So sometimes you may be reviewing a program that is still using the 2012 standards instead of the 2020 standards, for instance. As we move on, now that we've gone and given you some examples, the question that we want you to investigate is how thoroughly has this program, through its courses and the specialty answers, addressed the SPA standards in their courses. Your familiarity with the SPA standard assists as you review this program to determine the thoroughness of it. It's critical to understand that the courses and the syllabi must be linked to not only the SPA standards, but also the elements within that standard. Sometimes there may be 8 or 10 standards, but there are lots of little specialty sub-elements that must be addressed within those courses as well. By reviewing all of the course syllabi and making notes as you're reviewing those syllabi, you can make some decisions about how the SPA standards and elements are being addressed within this program and how the candidate is being given an opportunity to demonstrate those within this course. When you're responding to the question, we give you a rubric, and you will notice that we are asking you about the thoroughness of it. We also ask you to give us a comment. For instance, if you're looking at the scoring rubric and you're scoring and they're emerging, your comment may be something like 2 out of the 10 classes did not address the standards and elements, or 8 of the classes addressed all the standards and elements, but 2 did not, or all of the classes addressed the standards, but they didn't address the elements. So there are lots of different comments that could be made. But 3, meets expectations is what our expectation is from our KDE office, is that the courses and syllabi do demonstrate that they are aligned with the SPA standards and elements. So that's one of the things that you will be looking for. So as you review the programs, you want to see how the SPA standards and elements are addressed through the course objectives, the experiences, and the discussion. The requirement is that through all their required courses, that they would have demonstrated each of the SPA standards and elements. Now, if you want to know what a comment looks like, because we said it's important for you to score these, but it's also important for you to give us a comment. On the next slide, we have given you an example of a comment. Here's one that we just recently received from a content reviewer. The comment was, all SPA standards are met except 4E. The teacher recognizes learner misconceptions in a discipline that interferes with learning. This is what was not met. And the reasoning behind it is they list several EDU courses as meeting 4E, but they're all general pedagogy classes or field experiences. A great deal of physics education research has been done that has identified a large number of common learner misconceptions, and a physics teacher should know what these are in order to meet standard 4E. There's no evidence that this was in the preparation program. So that's the kind of comment that's very important for us because it's providing us very specific feedback. The program thought they had met all the standards, but you know what the intricacies are of some of those little elements, the 4E, the E element of standard 4. And it said that it's about learner misconceptions. And in this instance, the program didn't address, there was nothing in any of the syllabi, especially the ones that they listed, that talked about learner misconceptions. So those are comments that help provide feedback to justification for your scoring rubric. Okay, as we continue on, we also are going to talk about, do they assess the SPA content, skills, and competencies? Now this is real important to us because we want you to determine the extent to which all of the SPA standards and competencies are assessed when you're reviewing the syllabi and program information. Some things you want to consider are things like, is each SPA content standard assessed? Is the assessment a measure of that SPA content standard? Does the program identify how SPA competencies are assessed so that the candidate demonstrates these competencies? These could even be described in some of the clinical experiences. Do the within course assessments, and many of the courses will have projects and course assessments. Do those assessments measure the SPA content? These candidates have been exposed to the content and have been assessed is what we're looking for. And so you look at the syllabi in terms of the SPA standards. So this scoring rubric shows you, and again, the meets expectation would be that most assessments are clearly aligned to the SPA skills and competencies. And that would be answering the question of how do the courses and program assessments show measurement of the SPA skills and competencies. Emerging would be something like some of the assessments are clearly aligned, but others aren't, so that would be an emerging one. Exemplary, and you will have programs that you review that do this, and that's where they demonstrate throughout their courses exactly how they're measuring the SPA competencies within the coursework and within the program. So you'll get a variety of things that you look at. There are also some additional questions that we ask you to answer regarding SPA These deal with the pedagogy. And the pedagogy is real important to us because we know that this is how this particular content area, the knowledge and the subject matter, how they're assessing student progress. There's a variety of pedagogical approaches in schools, but some are specific to and are more effective and appropriate to specific content areas. And this is what we know that you know, that you're an expert in a particular area, and so you should know what pedagogical strategies and assessments and things are being presented to the candidate. Are they using things such as connecting the learning to students, using things in math such as concrete to abstract, problem solving? Are they using the language that's explicit in that particular content area? So the first question addresses to what degree is appropriate pedagogical content addressed? Again, not to the rubric yet, but back to the question of being addressed. Are there specific strategies and methods that are presented to the candidates? The second question talks about assessment. To what degree is the appropriate pedagogical content assessed? Were there accompanying rubrics that aligned with the demonstration of the knowledge of pedagogy for the candidates? Were there examples in the clinical experiences that allowed the candidates? So again, this is pedagogy. It's not the standards, but it's the pedagogy to teach and use within the SPA content area. And the rubric that goes along with this, again, it's a 4-3-2-1. The meets expectation would be that through the course descriptions and syllabi, they do demonstrate appropriate pedagogical content and knowledge. There's evidence of the pedagogy expected within the content area, and it's defined. So you're looking for not just standards here, but that they are presenting strategies and learning that would be specific to the content area. As we move on, we're going to be looking at how is it assessed? And this would be, again, the 4-3-2-1 measurement. And in the 3, it would be, do the syllabi demonstrate multiple performance-based assessments of candidate pedagogical content, knowledge, and skills? Now, again, this is measurement of pedagogy as opposed to measurement of the SPA standard. It's demonstrating the skills associated with the content area. So you would expect to be seeing something that asks them to perform and to demonstrate the pedagogy according to the content. Emerging means that they give minimal evidence, and maybe it's that they're using a lot of general strategies, a lot of things, but nothing very specific to the content area in which you're reviewing at this point. So again, you've got those two questions. How well is pedagogy addressed, and how well is it assessed? As we move on, the second huge area that we ask our content reviewers to address are the Kentucky academic standards. The focus on the Kentucky academic standards is that we know that within your particular SPA area, the content area, you will review to see, well, how do they incorporate the specific Kentucky academic standards in the teachings within this SPA area? The Kentucky Department of Education has adopted content standards for each required subject area for teachers, and they're to use these to focus and guide lesson development and to ensure students learn for success. KDE provides the content standards, and the districts determine how the Kentucky academic standards are delivered and assessed. However, the expectation that we have in our preparation programs is that the programs would guide the candidates on multiple ways to design, deliver, and assess instruction. So even though the candidates will go out to many different districts, the preparation programs are responsible for having them not just know what the standards are, but how do you design, deliver, and assess instruction related to those standards. So this is one of the things you want to be looking for as you are reviewing the courses and the syllabi, but also as you're reviewing other documents that the EPP provides with that. So you're looking on the instructional design piece. The question that we ask related to Kentucky academic standards is, do the coursework and experiences, you notice we go, beyond just courses now, do the experiences adequately prepare teacher candidates with the content knowledge needed for teaching the Kentucky academic standards? Here you're asked to review the syllabi and consider things such as, in the coursework and syllabi, do they expose candidates to the standards and the resources, such as the model curriculum framework, resources the candidates can use to reference and use, multiple venues for demonstrating understanding of the Kentucky academic standards. So a critical component of the teacher preparation program is to prepare the candidates to teach the Kentucky academic standards for student success, and to allow the candidates to be exposed to the variety of ways in which this can be done. The scoring rubric that we use for this Kentucky academic standards part, again, is a 4-3-2-1. The fourth goes above and beyond. 3 is what we're looking at, is do the course descriptions and the syllabi demonstrate inclusion of the Kentucky academic standards content base? One of the things that we need to look for here is that there is an expectation that this would be beyond just giving us standards numbers, that the candidate in their lesson plans have addressed, the Kentucky academic standards 1, 9, and 14, or whatever they are. We do look to see that they've been exposed to not only the content knowledge, but some experiences so they can design, deliver, and assess the content standards with students. And so you're looking at that when you're looking at the 3. 2 might be it's emerging. Maybe in the program you see where there's maybe one class that addresses the KAS and it doesn't address very many of the standards. Or maybe that particular class didn't address some strategies to expose the candidates to how to use the standards and things like that. So this is, again, a scoring rubric of 4-3-2-1 so that you can not only score it, but provide us some examples through your comments on, well, what did they include or what did they not include? And many times that's excellent feedback to the programs so they know what they might need to use for continuous improvement. Now there's a third area in which we ask our content reviewers to give us specific information, and this is on the field / clinical experiences. It's not only important for students to be able to be told about what you do within classes, but also to experience it in the real world. It's one thing to be told, but it's another thing to give experiences or simulations so that they can get a variety of ways in which they can do this. So what we do is we look to see, we know that our different universities provide this in diverse ways. So it's your job as a content reviewer to determine if the candidate receives sufficient opportunities for experiences and multiple types of observations and learning. Now there's some that are required, and I'm going to be giving you a list of the required ones. They have to show that they've had some experiences with students from at least 2 different ethnic or cultural groups of which the candidate is not a member. They must be provided opportunities to have experience with students from different socioeconomic backgrounds. They must have experiences with English language learners. They must have experience with students with disabilities. They must have experiences with students from across elementary, middle school, and high school programs. Also in the KRS 5040, there's a listing of things that they need to have some experiences with. For instance, they need to have observations about family resource centers or youth service centers. They need to have experiences with student tutoring, working one-on-one with students, interaction with families of students, attendance at school board and school council meetings, participation in a school-based professional learning community, and opportunities to assist teachers or other professionals. So this idea of field and clinical experiences is broad. It means throughout reviewing all the syllabi, throughout reviewing the clinical questions, throughout reviewing the KP12 questions, what is it that this program has designed to give all those multiple opportunities for not just observation, but also participation? That opportunities to put into practice teaching skills is quite important before the candidate gets to student teaching. And I know that COVID-19 has provided this as a challenge to many places, but you'd be surprised how our EPPs are coming forward with different ways in which they are providing some experiences for the students. So look and review. Now, the specific question that we ask is, to what degree did this program provide opportunities in the field and clinical experiences for students to demonstrate, and again, appropriate pedagogical knowledge, content knowledge with students in P12 environments. So I think that you have to pay attention to things such as, did the EPP document through the courses and responses have a planned sequence of experiences to develop appropriate knowledge? One particular note is that these experiences should not be student choice. They should be planned and sequenced by the EPP. So one of the things that we're asking you to review and give us response on is, how did they prepare for these? So when you look at this rubric on the field clinical experiences, you'll notice that we have the same 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're reviewing the program, courses and experiences. And look at the meets expectation on this one. This one's critical. The courses and the syllabi demonstrate planned, sequenced, and meaningful field clinical experiences. Now, planned, sequenced, and meaningful are very key words here. If you know how we teach these learning strategies to students, those are 3 key words. Planned means that, you know, it's not just giving a list that's in the regulation and say, we do these things. We have to plan how we're going to do them, and we have to sequence them so they're meaningful. For instance, in the first 2 courses of introduction, we may just be sending students out to observe and to make note of ways things are done. In the next 2 or 3 courses, we may have them go out and co-teach or co-plan or just participate in something. And in the last way, when you're talking about sequence and planning them, those that where they really need to have experiences in teaching these is where you would have them maybe do additional co-teaching or actually some singular teaching or tutoring students, so that all of those different things that we talked about that we're looking for here were not only presented to the students and the students just choosing, okay, I've got to get 5 hours, so what am I going to do? These are planned in these 5 hours in this course, because these are the objectives of this course and we're aligning to these SPA standards. Here's what the experiences are that our candidates will receive so they can demonstrate to us that they have these competencies and these skills. So again, that's a pretty meaningful rubric for us when we're looking at this. And again, we want to emphasize that it's the EPP program that is planning these and doing this, that it would not be student choice, because it's to say that it's planned and sequenced and meaningful means that we don't just give them, well, you can do it any of these ways. We want it to have meaning to the candidates so they are growing and learning. We also have 4 additional program requirements. These will be when you are introduced to the content review sheet. These will be separate. They won't all be on the same source, but these are yes/no questions, or somewhat. Yes, they did this. No, they did not, or they kind of did it somewhat. And so what we're asking is not just a yes, no, somewhat, but tell us what you saw. For instance, the first one talks about diversity. As you review that, how is diversity addressed? Do you see specific knowledge and skills addressing diversity and different ways in which the candidate can meet the needs of all students? How was that planned within the program? How was it addressed? What opportunities did the candidates have? If you feel like that maybe there wasn't any, and maybe they read an article but they didn't really get the experience, then you may want to give it a somewhat and give us a comment about why that was a somewhat on that. The second one is on assessment. Are we developing skills so that our candidates can assess P12 student learning? So you're looking for the different ways through informal assessment, classroom observations, classroom assessment. What types of classroom assessment have the candidates been exposed to? Have they practiced teacher reflection on their own teaching? what are they doing in terms of measuring student success? So in that assessment piece, there's a whole host of ways in which you can assess P12 students, and this needs to be very meaningful. So yes, they've done it in a lot of different ways. No, they maybe didn't do it, or it may be a somewhat, yeah, they kind of did it, but they talked about formal assessment. They talked about the Kentucky assessment or reading that assessment data, but they didn't really go deeply into the informal assessment that we need our students to. The literacy reading requirement, as you can see, we've listed a Kentucky regulation there, 5060. It says that it's not just elementary teachers that need to know how to teach literacy and reading, that middle school and secondary teachers must as well. So one of the things that you must review as you're looking through the courses across your content area, especially in the middle and secondary areas, is where are they picking up on the literacy and reading skills that are needed for our learners. One of the things that we realize many of our students are deficit on in student success are low reading scores, and we know that impacts comprehension. We know that impacts attainment of skills and everything else. So how did this program help our secondary teachers with the teaching of literacy and reading? And the last one, but probably most important in COVID-19, has been technology. How are we exposing our teacher candidates to the multiple types of technology and its uses for student success? Now, we know that our teacher candidates or teachers out there have had to experience lots of different platforms and resources and everything to teach right now. And many of our programs may not have exposed them to all those. I do know that many of our school districts have spent the summer teaching teachers how to use different types of technology. We've all learned different technologies ourselves recently. So this is one thing, are they doing more than just teaching them about Windows 365? Are they doing more than teaching them PowerPoint and Word? I mean, those are things that they're coming out with skills out of high school now. So what are we doing to expose our candidates to different platforms, to different mechanisms, to how they can actually use technology for self-paced modules, for independent backup learning, as well as for whole group learning? What is the evidence that you're finding within that? So those are pieces that are 4 questions, but they're very key questions to us as we move through our programs. Now we've moved to the last section, but before we take our questions, I want to talk to you about 3 things. The content questions that I just got through going over are specific to our initial teacher preparation programs, which are the most frequently reviewed programs by our content reviewers. However, we want you to also be aware that if you are reviewing an advanced teacher program, or if you're reviewing one of our other school professional programs, such as superintendent or principal or instructional supervisor or DPP or director of special ed, they have different questions because we're looking for different things within those preparation programs. So, but just be aware that what we have reviewed with you are those that are the most important. They're also underpinning questions for all the rest of the programs as well. And as we're getting ready to transition in a minute after the questions to where would I find the answer to these questions, we've put together a quick reference sheet for you, and we've taken each of the questions and we've located where you might start looking for this information.